It may be you're visiting with us today, and if so, we're very glad to have you. We see some of our young adults back from university studies for the weekend. And of course, because of the weekend holidays, a lot of our regular members are not here today. If you're visiting, you may be asking yourself, like we all do when we visit churches, what kind of church is this? And the elders realize that we need to speak to that question, not just for our visitors, but for ourselves from time to time. What kind of church are we trying to become? You know, a lot of us don't live in this neighborhood or even very close. Many people drive some distance to come here, but we do that because each of us find it worth the drive, because we feel like we're building something here, a community of believers that can help one another grow and develop and become what we should be as we transform into better disciples of Jesus Christ our Lord. And so I want to just present, not just in context of what kind of church we're going to be, but also as the context for what we're about to experience this morning with what Jeff's going to do with our sermon time. 4 points that I think speak to what kind of church we're trying to be. Lake Cities is a church that's not afraid to share our stories with each other and our children. In fact, we know we need to do that. We're all watching each other, and our children are watching us. They want to know how disciples of Christ deal with life struggles and challenges. So we need to share those stories openly with each other. Secondly, Lake Cities is a church that's not afraid to be honest with God and struggle with life's hard questions. You know, last week Jim spoke so eloquently about Job. Someone once wrote well that Job's virtue was not patience, it was honesty. And that may be the oldest scripture we have in the Bible. It sets the tone for the whole Bible. The Bible encourages us to be honest with God and honest with life's hard questions. And we want to be a church where we can do that and help each other. Thirdly, we want to be a church that's not afraid to be vulnerable with each other. Paul tells us, he encouraged the Galatians. He said, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. There's an old Swedish proverb that says, joy shared is double joy, sorrow shared is half a sorrow. We need to be open and vulnerable with each other, share our sorrows and our joys with each other, because we need each other. And the last point is along the same line. We want to be a church that's not afraid to lament and grieve with each other. We've had a lot of loss, this church has, in recent months, and we need each other, to help each other as we grieve and as we mourn. Again, we're very glad you're here today. If you're not already glad you're here, I think by the time we finish our assembly this morning, you will feel very blessed for being here. Jeff?
Gary, that well said, by the way, and we do want to hear always from our elders about just what it is we want to be and what we want to do here. In talking about story and sharing story, which is what we're going to do this morning, I can't think of a better story than this one here. Clint and Tracy Gann are going to come up, so you can start moving while I'm talking. And they're going to give you a little bit of an update, and so for some of you that don't know Clint and Tracy, they'll give you some background as to what their life has been like, say, the last 8 to 10 months. And I think that this is a powerful, we don't use the word much here, but it's a powerful testimony, not because of anything that they've done, but all because of what God has done. And so I'm confident that this story is going to bless you, and that you'll hear today a word from the Lord about what the Lord's doing in and among us and around us and through us. Good morning, Ganns.
Good morning, Jeff.
Wow, you are brave to do this. This is not easy. So, okay, pretend for a moment that I have never met you, it's the first time. Can you imagine a life where I didn't know Clint Gann? Oh my goodness.
I can't.
But give us an idea of where did this all start, and take us through, give us the highlights, give us the news of the Ganns in the last 8 months.
This whole thing started in December of 2022. My doctor called for a CAT scan of my kidneys, and 3 weeks later in January, he called me up almost in a panic. He said, there are spots that appear on your pancreas and liver, and you need to get this checked out immediately. And through the course of this story, it was interesting how often the word immediately comes up. So we scheduled a scope and a lab test, and that doctor came back and said, it is confirmed, it is cancer, it is stage 4 cancer, and you need to get to an oncologist immediately. So we scheduled an appointment with the oncologist, and he confirmed again, said it is pancreas and liver cancer, it is stage 4, and it's bad, but if I were you, I would fight it. So we made plans to do chemotherapy, which scared me, but anyway. The first chemo session began late in March, and it wasn't too bad. And I remember thinking, if this is as bad as it's going to get, I can handle this. Well, that was a short-lived thought. The second session was 2 weeks later, and he immediately began to go downhill. Mm-hmm. And just a week later, well, the following week, I was at the doctor's office every day getting transfusions just of saline to keep me hydrated. And on Friday, it was so bad that the doctor sent, with Robert Burns on transportation that day, said, take him across the street to the emergency room. And that's basically the last thing I remember.
So you can't tell any more of this story, which is good. Tracy's going to tell it because she actually remembers it. And I should say there's a few God winks even in that beginning part, which is you went in to look at your kidneys. It wasn't the thought of pancreas or liver, and you really were kind of asymptomatic as far as you're going, I don't really feel bad.
As far as we know, I am still asymptomatic.
Okay. So you go to the ER, and Tracy, things start to go bad quickly, and give us some idea of what go bad means.
So his blood sugar was like 840 something, and he gets into this diabetic ketoacidosis crisis, and so they're doing every scan, every test, everything in the emergency room, and the oncologist comes across the street to check on him, and my sister and I are sitting there in the emergency room with Clint unconscious, and so the doctor looks at the CT scan, and then he looks over at us and he's like, well, so where is the tumor supposed to be? And I'm like, it's in the pancreas, it's in the tail, and it's like this big around. He's like, well, I don't see it. And so he's showing us the screen, and we don't see anything, and he just sort of off the cuff just sort of says, well, these are either not his scans or it's just gone. And then he left. And so so we continued to sort of have this emergency of, his heart was going like 175.
I remember
beats a
sitting in a
minute.
room seeing a heart rate of 200.
Yeah.
That was bad. He's sedated at this point. Then what's the other? There were some other things going on that it just was not. I mean, a whole laundry
They moved
list.
this upstairs to ICU.
Yeah.
And the heart was going nuts, and they couldn't get, and the blood pressure was going low, and the heart
Right.
was going high, and how do you get those to balance? And
But
they're
it
trying
looked
to get
very much that he was close to death.
They told us on the next morning, you need to start bringing the family in. This is not going to last very long. And so we scurried around, got a plane ticket for Grady. He came home Sunday morning.
That's great. Well, Grady's their son that's up at school in Chicago, and so that was really a big part of this story of wanting to get him home and kind of say some last things. And
Yes. So then he kind of started getting a little better, at least stable. And so I'd gotten kind of close to this one ICU nurse who was just phenomenal. They were all phenomenal. But I was like, Whitney, like what happened? Like, what's the ER like here? Is there any chance that people like mix up scans in the ER here? Does that happen? And she's like, what are you talking about? So I told her a little story, and she said, well, we'll just fix that right now. I will just order scans and we will redo CT scans and we'll know that they're Clint scans.
Yeah.
So they redid the CT scans and the doctor comes in the next day and he, is reading the radiology report out loud and it says things like pancreas unremarkable. And
I've always said that about you, Clint, that you have an unremarkable pancreas.
And so he's looking at it on the screen and he doesn't see anything and he doesn't see anything on the liver. And then, but his heart rate is still going nuts and we can't sort of get things terribly headed in the right direction. But he's conscious and he's talking to us and being witty and hallucinating and.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
That was a fun visit,
hallucinations.
by the way, just,
Yes.
And so we're trying to, now what's funny is at the same time, news is kind of leaking out. People are saying, oh man, Clint's cancer is gone. There's kind of this rejoicing that's going on as it's spreading. And I'm trying to go, wait a minute, the guy I just saw is very close to death and continuing to, so the crisis that's going on in his body is still going on, that's got him in the ER. It's just that we've got these clear scans. And so we're really we don't know what to make of that.
Exactly. So we decided Grady's got to go back to school. He's got to finish classes. He's got to pack his room and, get home by, May 5th was, when he was going to be done with classes. And we just need to send him back and have him try to finish strong. And so then, so he went back and things stabilized somewhat, made some improvement. So we're trying to figure out how to manage. And then he starts bleeding internally. And so then we had another round of, okay, you need to bring in the family because this is not going to last long. He's bleeding and we can't tell where he's bleeding.
And they're giving him blood to kind of keep up with the bleeding. The real crisis here is if you go in to look for the bleed,
right,
it may make it worse. And then if you do find a bleed, can you go in and even do the surgery? There's this big question for you, Tracy.
But, we're 10 days in, and every day the palliative care nurse is coming to talk to me about putting him on hospice. And, do I have support? And this is not going to, end well. He is going to die, and you need to get ready. That's the message I get every day from the palliative nurse. That's the message I get every day from the doctors. And so the choice was, well, you can either do the scope, try to find the bleeding. To do the scope, we're going to have to sedative, we're going to have to give him pain medication, and because of his weakened condition, he will stop breathing. So you're going to have to intubate it. And then we'll see if we can find the bleed, and if we can find the bleed, then we'll try to fix it. And then if we can fix it, then of course we'll wean him off the ventilator.
And the question with that, if you've not experienced a family member on a ventilator, is can you get them off? Because once you're on a ventilator, it is very difficult when it happens. But you weren't not sure that was something. You were asleep this whole time, by the way. You had no
memory of this at all.
But there were a few moments of lucidity that you had a conversation with Clint, and you're trying to kind of say, hey, what do you want to do here? And talk about that decision.
We did.
Yes, we had lots of conversations. I thought we had conversations, but...
He signed his car over to me, Grayson.
Signed him over to you. Or at least his grocery bill.
We have all the usual legal things in place that I would want to have in place. Living will, we're not going to do heroic measures, and, if I've got a terminal illness, Clint had signed all those things. We've done all the things legally that we need to do. And so I prayed about it, and I really felt strongly that he would not survive a scope. That was just not going to happen. He would not survive the sedation, the pain medicine, the intubation, and I didn't want to be in a position of having to then stop a ventilator.
So you make this, I think, faith-based. I remember standing in the hallway, actually having a conversation with you and some other people, but kind of the question of, is it okay to do this? Is it okay to do that? She's saying this very matter-of-factly. If you've ever had to make that decision for a loved one, it's gut-wrenching. But you kind of say, I'm going to let the Lord do what the Lord's going to do.
Exactly. I felt very strongly that he was in better hands with the Lord than with any of these doubting doctors around me. And so my decision was that I said to the doctors, I'm like, I don't want to do anything risky. I don't want to do anything heroic. I want you to just keep the course. I want you to keep giving them the transfusions until we can get Grady home on May 5th.
Now, that was really the center of your prayers, Tracy. I think this is a good time to kind of talk about that. That you, sorry, Clint, she never prayed for a miracle. She never prayed for you.
She never prayed that I would meet you.
Okay, so what then is the prayer, Tracy? If the prayer is not, I want to heal the whole, the prayer is what?
I knew that if Clint went to be with the Lord, he was going to be in better shape than all of us. And I knew that if that's God's plan, I was going to be okay. And so my deep and fervent prayer every day was that whatever the Lord decided to do, that it would not shipwreck our boy's faith, whatever that needed to be.
You did not want there to be a barrier between Gracie and Grady and the Lord over Clint's vaccine.
Yes.
Earlier in the year, from before now, Grady spoke publicly that when he first heard the news, he was mad at God. He came to grips with it, but that's a legitimate prayer.
So, and I don't think I need to say this, but I just want to say that these are deep, dark, turbulent waters of faith. This is this, I've used the word shipwreck. I think that's great. These are the things, not just for a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, for the 88-year-old among us that's going, this is hard. These are hard questions. Okay, let's kind of do the rest of the story, and then we're going to talk about lessons and thoughts. I said he's like the Energizer Bunny. He just kept going. He wouldn't. He was very.
So,
well, he gets better, right?
Well, they did 12 transfusions in 10 days. And every day the doctors were like, we can't keep doing this. He's losing blood as fast as we're putting it in. And they're like, so is your son going to just take his grade and not do his finals and come home early? And I just kept saying, he'll be home May 5th. And we're just going to keep on as we are until he gets home on May 5th. And the pattern had been, Clint would get an infusion or transfusion, and he would perk up, and he would, be really with us and talk, and then you could just sort of see he would just sort of slowly decline as the blood levels decline and blood pressure would go down. So he just kind of did this transfusion, and so he got his last transfusion on Friday, May 5th. Grady got home that afternoon. And, I said to him, we'll have about 48 hours where Clint's really, coherent and with us when he's got enough blood. And then it's just going to sort of be this pretty rapid descent, and he will, be unconscious, and then, that's it. We're done. And so,
but that didn't happen.
Nope. The next day on the 6th, you came up to the hospital, and I signed the hospice papers at that point, finally. I finally
I have to
signed.
insert here, it's a little unnerving to wake up and find a DNR bracelet on your arm.
Yeah. But somewhere in all of that, I can't remember which visit this was, Clint. You had a night, where you said, I'm going to sleep. I fully expect to wake up in the company of angels and Jesus, right?
That's true.
And do you remember that? You have a lucid memory?
That was one of the very few memories that I have. You and Bailiff.
Yep.
And I said, I'm going to sleep. I may wake up with you.
That was the great line. They said, "You must be so disappointed to see us." And you had that raspy voice. He had a feeding tube, and he goes, "Yeah."
I woke up the next morning and there's Jeff, and I knew I had not made it.
All right. Okay, so now you're released to hospice, which is kind of we're going to let nature take its course, and then he starts
Right.
getting better.
So they take off the heart monitors, then after a couple of days, then no more IV nutrition, they're just taking everything. The room gets quieter and quieter, and, people don't come by, we don't do labs, and it just gets, and he was getting better. He didn't sort of do what we had seen him do the previous 2 weeks of, kind of getting less coherent. He was just getting better. And he was wanting to try to eat something. And so after a week, I said to the hospice doctor, I'm like, I know we don't do labs because it's hospice. I said, but can we just do a set of labs to see what the blood work looks like, give me some kind of information? I said, because it just doesn't look the way it did last week. So they agreed to do labs, even though you don't do labs on hospice, and his hemoglobin was up. It was higher than a week before. So the bleeding stopped, and we don't know why.
I don't want to just gloss over the next month or so, but Clint continues to get better. He goes through rehab. They kind of at each stage say, okay, but this is as good as it's going to get. And then he kind of gets better, and then this is as good as he'll get. And then he shows up driving a car, which I was very upset by. The image of you coming out from behind a car that you've been driving was too much for me. And we would love, and that's the end of the story. And we lived happily ever after. And Clint's running marathons now. Right? That would be our preferred story, but we don't get that. We get a while later.
We got out, released from the hospital, and go home, begin physical therapy, and make an appointment with our oncologist to begin maintenance care, for lack of a better term. And the doctor was shocked that I was still here to show up for this appointment. But he said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is repeat the scans. So that was fine. We repeated the scans, we go back to his office, and he said, the cancer is back in the pancreas and liver. And it's stage 4. So he referred us to yet another oncologist to see immediately. Within the same organization, but this doctor is a lot more involved in clinical trials. So we met with him initially, and he just gushed this information away, and he concluded by saying, I know you're overwhelmed, take a couple of weeks and we'll meet together. We go back in 2 weeks and say, this is what we're going to do. He says, will your labs show that you're not eligible? He says, and it's an FDA decision, not mine. You are simply not eligible for any clinical trial.
So we're in a bit of a limbo here. There's not. I said, I asked Clint had said before, I really want to share my testimony, and I said, Clint, how does your testimony now change that you don't have the ending? And he said, well, the ending was always going to be the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
I said that?
You said that over biscuits, I think it was. I don't know. So, Tracy, what do we make of this? What do we do with it's some kind of healing, but it's not the full healing, or is the Lord acted, but He didn't do everything that we want? Like what? How do you navigate this?
First, I would say that we do believe that the Lord acted and that Clint received multiple miracles over that time. I don't think there's any doctor at Baylor Grapevine that would say that what they did saved his life. Mm-hmm. Because all anybody was saying was, yes, this is not happening. You just need to get on board with hospice, and this is ending, and you're done, and he's done. And so nobody there thinks they did anything that caused him to be able to walk and drive and enjoy people and do stuff and come to worship. So we do believe that there is a miracle.
Absolutely.
And our view is that it's an earthly miracle. All the miracles Jesus did on earth, other than his resurrection, were for a season and for a time. And Lazarus had
stick with this event, church. Every healing of Jesus is a temporary healing. Lazarus died again, right? He restored sight, he drove demons out, but all of those people he healed still died. That's something to remember, something to put in context here. So, we got time? What did we get? What's the blessing?
Absolutely, we got time. And we don't know what that looks like for tomorrow or next week. But we glorify God in the blessing right now.
At a bare minimum, Robert shared with me. He said, you were given the gift of the summer with grade.
Okay, but I'm really curious. This is where I want to spend just a little bit of time. What'd you learn? What'd you get? What were your eyes open to? I learned that my prayers sometimes for you all is not big enough. Felt terrible. I never thought to ask God to just let the cancer go away and let him get out of the hospital, let him walk again. I was always praying for comfort and presence and be with the doctors and things like that. What did you learn? What did you take from this? What did you see?
One of the first things we saw was the power of prayer from people that care. At a bare minimum, we estimate there were over 1,000 people specifically praying for me. And that's just the ones we knew of. And I am convinced that many of them prayed bigger than you did and prayed specifically for a miracle with conviction that they would receive that.
So I've said a couple times to Clint through all this, it's kind of a big deal. But so much so that one of the nurses asked you through the process of all this, she says, what?
So we did have a lot of influence with the medical people, especially the nurses at the hospital. I mean, they asked, like, who is this guy? Like, did we know him? Like, so many people are coming to visit him. Like, there's never, like, not people here and crammed in the room. Like, who is he? And I said that he is love, just who he is. And we have this amazing family of believers just down the road who...
Services start at 10 a.m.
Yes. So, I mean, the people in this room were the hands and feet of God every day. You were faithful. God was faithful. There's never anything we needed that you didn't provide for us, that God provided through you. And that was amazing.
By the way, this family delivered so much food to us. We did determine that a large percentage of y'all prefer Tex-Mex. Now, that's not a complaint, it's just an observation, because we like Tex-Mex as well.
But at one point, it's not too long, you go, we finally got through all the food we brought, right? But they brought food. What else did you see? Go ahead.
There was a lot of transportation help because Grayson was still in school, and my twin sister spent 3 weeks with us. She took him everywhere to get haircut, to clothes shopping, to school, to tennis practice, and then she picked him up after everything else.
And I want to say something about Clint and Tracy. They allowed a lot of people to serve them. That in itself is a gift. Honestly, a lot of times we don't know what to do. And so he said to us, hey, we need you to drive somebody here or go buy pants for somebody here. But like really specific ways, allowing us to serve you was a huge service to us. If that makes sense.
There's something in this church family that I call the Brad Coleman complex.
Uh-oh. Calling you out, brother. Trouble is.
Brad asked me one day, I guess I would lose it somehow. He says, what can I bring you? I said, a glass of HTO, which is the best tea in the world. But he shows up with his glass of tea and immediately begins asking, can I mow your yard? Can I paint your house? Can I clean your pool? Just, and he was very specific. He had a list. These are things I can do for you, and I will do it.
But we had people taking care of our dry cleaning and picking up the mail from the post office, and, in addition to things like food and getting Grayson where he needed to be, I mean, it was a million things.
I talked about how we would end this, and there's a really graceful dismount to this. Last words, last observations.
God is faithful.
Thanks. Dear friend of mine for many years told me that what my experience did for her. She said, your experience has made me much more aware of the sovereignty of God and has brought me closer to Jesus. And quite frankly, that was one of our prayers for this, was that for those who believe, it would be an affirmation. And for those who don't know Jesus, that it would spark their curiosity to come to know Him.
But all of this would glorify God in the way that we bring intentions behind Him. And you've done that beautifully this morning. Can we thank them?